We begin with Syria again. Bashar al-Assad is out, but it's still volatile. The Israelis are launching attacks and taking up territory. The rebels are installing their own leadership. The people are returning to the streets, and the Iranians are plotting their next moves. Assad's ouster is a big setback to Iran. Their so-called axis of resistance has weakened. Will they make up for this loss by pursuing nuclear weapons? We'll discuss that tonight. Meanwhile, in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu finally ended up in court today. It's something that he's avoided for years. But will he eventually face the music? Google has unveiled a new chip that can apparently beat supercomputers. What makes it so powerful, and why does the world need it? China is bracing for Donald Trump announcing the first of its kind stimulus in 14 years. Will this be enough to revive their economy? What is a ghost gun? Is it legal to own a 3D printed weapon? Donald Trump is trolling Justin Trudeau, calling him the governor of Canada in his latest social media post. China is looting African gold and destroying their heritage in the process. Will reflecting the sun's rays slow down global warming? Scientists are warning against such geoengineering gambles. And what protections do Indian political parties offer their women members against sexual harassment? Why don't the existing laws apply to them? The matter came up in India's Supreme Court. We'll discuss what happened. The headlines first. US President-elect Donald Trump adds another Indian American to his team, appoints Harmeet Dhillon as the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. But Trump's pick is again a controversial one. Dhillon had criticized the killing of a Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar and backed the 2020 farmers' protest in India. Moscow arrests a German-Russian citizen. Claims he was preparing to sabotage a rail line on orders from Ukraine. Berlin says it's tracking the case. The arrest comes weeks after another German citizen was held. He was accused of trying to sabotage energy installations. Taiwan says China is deploying dozens of ships around the self-ruled island, puts its forces on high alert. Taipei claims this is Beijing's biggest maritime mobilization around Taiwan in years. The Taiwanese president had recently visited the United States, a trip which had angered China. The Sri Lankan president will travel to India on Sunday. This will be his first overseas visit as head of state. Anura Kumara Dissanayake will hold talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. New Delhi has been concerned about Beijing's growing influence in Sri Lanka. China is the island nation's biggest bilateral lender. And in Sudan, an airstrike hits a market in North Darfur, killing more than 100 people and injuring several others. The Sudanese military denies carrying out this attack. Thousands have been killed and millions displaced in the war between the army and the paramilitary. It's day 3 in post-Assad Syria. All eyes are on the capital, Damascus. How soon will normalcy return? Who will form the new government? And what is the world community hoping for? These are just some of the questions that everyone has been asking, and today we got some answers. Things are slowly stabilizing in Syrian cities. Just look at the scenes in Damascus. You can see a lot more cars on the road. You can also see people walking about. It's not like residents are hiding inside their homes. Some volunteers are also at work. They could be seen sweeping bullets away from the streets, mostly from the celebratory gunfire. Even government employees are returning to work. Dozens of them arrived at Syria's central bank today. They're hoping for a fresh start.
God willing, we will start a new shift, a new day, a new year, a new life, everything new.
So far, things are stable. We haven't heard reports of widespread looting or revenge attacks or violent flare-ups. But symbols of the Assad regime remain vulnerable, especially portraits and statues. Look at what happened at the National Library in Damascus. A lot of focus is also on the Sednaya prison. It's located on the outskirts of the capital. Former prisoners tell horrid tales of this facility. It's often called the human slaughterhouse or the Syrian gulag. When Assad fell, Syrians rushed to this prison. They tried to free their jailed family members. Thousands of them did make it out. But reports say the rescue mission is now over. So all in all, it's a tentative march to stability. You can't call it normal. But it's not a breakdown either. Which brings us to the Syrian rebel groups. How are they shifting from rebellion to ruling? Well, the main group is the HTS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They led the blitzkrieg to oust Bashar al-Assad. And now they're forming a government. Yesterday, the HTS leader met Syria's outgoing prime minister. Listen to what he said.
The young men have gained a lot of experience. They started working from nothing. Idlib is small and has no resources, but thank God, we were able to achieve something big during the past period. You will see experience. It's not zero.
That's Abu Muhammad al-Julani, former al-Qaeda fighter turned rebel leader in Syria. He has picked an interim prime minister for Syria. His name is Mohammed al-Bashir. He too is a senior leader of the HTS. Now, you may have noticed something in Julani's remarks. He says that his men have experience ruling. How is that? You see, the HTS controlled Idlib and much of northern Syria. They basically ran a parallel government in this region. And that is why Julani says that he has experience, his team has experience. But will it be enough to rule all of Syria? He's facing both internal and external challenges. The external one is Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel cheered the downfall of Bashar al-Assad, but he also senses an opportunity here. Israeli troops have occupied a buffer zone with Syria. It's located in the Golan Heights region. This area legally belongs to Syria, but Israel has been occupying it. Since the 1967 war, it's been under Israeli control for almost 6 decades. Some reports also say that Israeli tanks have been spotted deep inside Syria, just 25 kilometers from Damascus. But Israel has denied these reports. What they have admitted is taking over the buffer zone. Israel is calling it a limited and temporary operation.
We are taking all the actions necessary to try to ensure our security with regard to the new situation created in Syria. Together with Defense Minister Israel Katz and with the backing of all cabinet members, I instructed the IDF to seize the buffer zone between us and Syria and the positions controlling and adjacent to it.
Not just ground operations, Israel is also attacking from the skies. Reports say they have launched some 300 airstrikes on Syria, and the targets, mostly weapons and ammunition depots. The idea is to destroy them before terrorists get their hands on them. But the rest of the world is worried. Arab countries have condemned Israel's actions. They say Netanyahu is grabbing land while Syria is busy. Members of the UN Security Council also agree. All of them have backed Syria's territorial integrity. The United Nations has asked Israel to back off.
And then a very troubling development. We are continuing to see Israeli movements and bombardments into Syrian territory. This needs to stop. Extremely important that we don't see any action from any international actor that destroys the possibility for this transformation in Syria to take place.
And that's the external challenge for the rebels, Israel trying to take up Syrian land. Now the internal challenge, starting an inclusive political process. Let me pull up the map for you. The rebels and Julani do not control all of Syria. Kurdish groups have influence in the northeast. These are fighters backed by the United States. Can Gilani bring them to the table? We've seen mixed signals so far. Some reports mention clashes between Turkey-backed rebels and US-backed Kurds. But in one city, they struck a deal. The northeastern city of Manjib. Kurds and rebels were fighting in the city, but their backers, Turkey and the US, signed a deal. So the Kurds have begun withdrawing. Even in Assad's hometown, there was a breakthrough. It's a city dominated by the Alawite sect. It's a Muslim minority group, the Alawites. Most Syrian Alawites had supported Assad's rule. But reports say they have now welcomed the rebels. If true, it's a boost to the legitimacy of the new rulers. Most countries in the region will be watching these moves closely, but none more intently than Turkey. This country is home to some 3 million Syrian refugees, and President Erdogan is keen to send them back home. Hundreds of Syrians are lining up at the Turkish border. Erdogan says he is opening the gates.
It is my belief that our Syrian brothers' longing for their country, which has lasted 13 years, will slowly end now. We have started seeing signs of this already. To prevent congestion and to ease traffic, we are opening the Yeladaji border gate for crossing.
The rebels are certainly moving fast, but the danger is not over yet. Prolonged instability could lead to more radicalism. The US is worried about that. They believe the ISIS will try to use this period of churn. And they've got a point. The HTS leader Gilani used to fight for Al-Qaeda and ISIS. He may claim to have changed, but the world cannot take him at his word. Now, the regime change may have happened in Damascus, but the aftershocks are being felt in Tehran. Make no mistake, this is a body blow for Iran. They had just one state ally in the region, and that was Bashar al-Assad. The rest are armed groups and ragtag militias like the Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen. So Assad's ouster is a big setback for the Iranian regime. Their foreign minister put the blame on Assad's army. He said they failed in their duty.
The Syrian army failed to carry out its duty. We were never supposed to replace the Syrian army in resolving their domestic affairs or fighting the opposition. Our battlefield presence in Syria was for fighting the ISIS and was ended after IS was defeated. We were also there to support the resistance.
So Iran says it wasn't our fight, which is frankly a plain lie. Iran's support to Assad is well documented. In 2012, their top military officers visited Syria. They found Assad's regime teetering, and that's when Tehran decided to intervene. They have invested between $30 and $50 billion in Syria. They've also deployed thousands of fighters, and not just their own. Iran has also convinced, or did convince, Hezbollah to send their men. So Tehran cannot distance itself from this debacle. It's very much their failure, and it could not have come at a worse time. Iran's regional axis is already weakened. In Gaza, Hamas is out of power. Israel has dismantled most of their capabilities. Up north in Lebanon, Hezbollah is also struggling. Reports say they lost some 4,000 fighters in the war with Israel, plus a number of top leaders. Israel took them out with pager bombs. These were all major blows to the Iranian regime, but Assad's fall is more devastating than all of this. And I'll give you two reasons why. Number one, Assad was a president. He had legitimacy, unlike Iran's other proxies. And number two, Syria's location. It was the link between Iran and its proxies. Look at the map. From Iran, weapons and supplies would go to Iraq. From Iraq, the supplies would enter Syria. And from Syria, they would enter Lebanon. That's where the Hezbollah would collect them. I know what you're thinking. If Assad was so important, why did Iran not help him? The obvious explanation is they were too stretched. Hezbollah was busy with the war, and Iran was focused on Israel, so neither party could spare the support. It has revealed a major weakness of the Iranian regime, their inability to protect their allies. Consider what happened to former Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh. He was killed inside Tehran. And now another ally has been left to his fate. This is probably the weakest Iran's regime has looked in decades, both internally and externally. Inside Iran, there is discontent about the economy. Outside, its regional axis is fading. So what can the regime do? A lot of experts fear a nuclear escalation. The UN atomic watchdog raised the alarm last week. It said Iran is planning to increase its stockpile of nuclear weapons-grade uranium. And the logic is quite simple here. The Axis was Iran's tool of deterrence and power projection. They spent many years building it up. If that axis weakens, Iran needs an alternative, another tool to deter and scare its rivals, which could be nuclear weapons. In the meantime, expect escalation from Iran's remaining proxies, especially the Houthis in Yemen. On Monday, they fired drones at central Israel. One of them struck a home in the city of Yavne. So Iran does have options to keep up the fight, but what they choose could also depend on Israel and Donald Trump. Netanyahu has always talked about toppling the Iranian regime. He may sense an opportunity here.
Assad's regime is a central link in Iran's axis of evil. This regime has fallen. This is a direct result of the blows we inflicted on Iran and Hezbollah, the main supporters of Assad's regime. This created a chain reaction throughout the Middle East.
He's talking about a chain reaction, but if that reaction reaches Tehran, expect them to lash out. The next year, all eyes will be on Donald Trump, on whether he imposes more sanctions on Iran, and if he does, the regime will fear internal discontent, which is another recipe for instability. It's been a very bad year for Iran and its allies in West Asia, but at this point, 2025 could be worse. Our next story is from Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made history. He is the first sitting Israeli Prime Minister to be charged with a crime. Netanyahu has been indicted in 3 separate cases of corruption, and he was hauled into court today. He started giving his testimony. The trial is expected to be a long, drawn-out affair. It will take up a lot of his time. And remember, this comes in the middle of a war. So what led to this situation? Why is Israel's judiciary so eager to proceed with this case? And will Netanyahu actually face the music once all of this is over? Let's start with the alleged crimes. Benjamin Netanyahu has been charged in 3 cases. All of them are corruption cases. The first is Case 1000, also known as the gifts affair. Netanyahu and his wife Sarah received gifts from 2 businessmen, Hollywood producer Arnon Milchan and Australian billionaire James Packer. These gifts were worth almost $200,000. They include pink champagne, cigars and jewelry. Now Netanyahu insists that these gifts were just gifts from friends, but the police believe otherwise. They say that there was a quid pro quo. Netanyahu pushed a tax exemption law which benefited overseas Israelis, including Milchan. He also got help with a US visa. The Israeli police say that this constitutes fraud and breach of trust. That's the first case. The second case is Case 2000, also known as the favorable coverage case. Netanyahu is accused of making a deal with a media baron. His name is Arnon Moses. The Israeli Prime Minister wanted favorable coverage. That is the charge. In exchange, he promised to undermine Moses' competition. Again, quid pro quo. And again, the charges are fraud and breach of trust. The last one is Case 4000, the regulatory favors case. This too involves favorable media coverage. It features the owner of an Israeli telecom company who also controlled a news website. Now, Netanyahu allegedly wanted positive coverage on this website, so he allowed the telecom firm to complete a merger deal by passing regulations and red tape. And for this, he's been charged with fraud, breach of trust, and bribery. And the bribery charge could mean 10 years in prison. Now, all of these cases are quite old. They were filed way back in 2019. That's 5 years ago. But today was the first time that Netanyahu ended up in court. He's been quite busy, you see. A lot has been happening in all these years. The court started questioning the witnesses when the cases were filed in 2019. Then in 2020, the Wuhan virus pandemic struck, so legal proceedings were delayed. Then in 2022, Netanyahu won the election, he became prime minister, and he began trying to dismantle Israel's judiciary. This led to mass protests against the prime minister and his plan to overhaul the Israeli judiciary. These were the scenes in Israel, but all of that stopped in October last year when the Hamas attacked. And then the subsequent war in Gaza. Israeli courts agreed to give Netanyahu some time, first to deal with Hamas, then to fight the Hezbollah. But now the courts are tired of waiting. Gaza lies in ruins and a ceasefire is in place with Hezbollah, so the judges decided that enough was enough. It was time to Netanyahu to appear in court and start testifying. Netanyahu disagrees, of course. He tried to get all of this postponed. The courts gave him 1 extra week and told him to appear on December 10th, that is today. In the meantime, his ministers tried to delay proceedings too. They said taking up Netanyahu's time would bring, and I'm quoting, would bring severe harm to Israel's security. They cited the recent chaos in Syria. Israel has deployed troops there and is bombing Syrian military infrastructure. The minister said that all of this needed Netanyahu's undivided attention. But the courts weren't having any of it. They said Netanyahu must appear 3 days a week. He must be in court 3 days a week, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And for 6 hours each day. That is the court's order. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu finally complied today. He took a defiant stance, though, and proclaimed his innocence.
Regarding the trial, I heard in the media that they say that I want to avoid the trial. Have you heard that? Do I want to dodge? What a sad thing. For 8 years, I have been waiting for this day. I have been waiting 8 years for this day to present the truth. For 8 years, I have been waiting to finally blow up the deluded and absurd charges against me.
Blowing up the charges will take time. This case will drag on, maybe until 2026. So Netanyahu will be busy shuttling between the courtroom and the war room. And the Israeli people are divided over this. His supporters say that this is ridiculous, that he shouldn't be distracted like this during a war. But his critics say it's about time.
We are here to shout in front of the Prime Minister of Israel, enough with the war. Bring back the hostages. Stop the killing in Gaza. Stop everything. You have no mandate to continue the war. A Prime Minister accused of crimes must declare himself unable to serve.
Netanyahu's detractors accuse him of extending the war for personal benefit. They think he wants to keep the wars going so he doesn't have to face the courts. But remember, the situation in West Asia is still volatile. Who knows what will happen tomorrow? Perhaps Israel will start fighting a new enemy and Netanyahu will get exempted again from court appearances. But for now, it seems that the wheels of justice are in motion. For thousands of years, humanity has searched for answers, answers hidden in the fabric of the universe. We built tools. Then came modern machines and even supercomputers. All of them had one goal: to solve the puzzles of our world. But some problems were too vast, seemingly impossible. Well, at least until recently, because now Google seems to have an answer. It has unveiled a new chip called Willow. Now, Willow is not like any other chip we know. It's a quantum chip. In simpler words, it can solve a problem that none of our supercomputers can. And Google claims to have tested this chip. Willow was given a problem. It took five minutes to solve it. Do you know how the fastest supercomputer fared? It would take 10 septillion years to solve the same problem. 10 septillion, that's 1 followed by 24 zeros. That's 10 septillion. That is more than the age of our universe. So you get how fast Willow is. And for Google, this is a major breakthrough, the first in this field in nearly 30 years. But does the world really need such machines? What exactly is quantum computing? How can it change the way we live? For the answers, you'll have to brace for a science lesson. We'll try to keep it simple. Imagine your regular computer like a librarian. Your computer is like a librarian, a very, very smart librarian. You ask them a question, they start flipping through the books. As a librarian, your computer can only look at one book at a time. But quantum computers are very different. They're like a magical librarian. They can look at a lot of books simultaneously. Your quantum computing librarian can read every page of every book at once, all at the same time. That's how it works. So will quantum computers replace our normal computers? The answer is no. Quantum computers are not designed for daily work. They're designed to solve big problems, problems that are too tough for our computers to handle. For instance, a new medicine. Scientists go through millions of chemicals. They run all sorts of simulations to find the perfect formula that will cure a disease, and that is when a new medicine is created. A normal computer would take years to do this, but a quantum computer can analyze the possibilities way faster. It can get it done in a matter of hours. And that makes its potential limitless. Imagine predicting the weather with absolute accuracy, or designing new medicines in a matter of days, or making artificial intelligence smarter, or building new technology that we haven't even imagined yet. Quantum computers can do all of it and more. It's like opening a Pandora's box of ideas, which is why countries are investing in it. The United States is considered as the world leader in quantum computing. Their government is pushing for advanced technology, and so are private companies like Google. But in terms of money, China takes the cake. It has the highest investment in quantum technology, around $15 billion. Then there are the likes of Europe and Japan. They have poured in a lot of money in quantum technology. And then there's India, which is also trying to build a quantum ecosystem, investing nearly $500 million in it. But as they say, with great power comes great responsibility. The rise of quantum computing also brings challenges. The first one is viability. Take Google's Willow chip, for instance. It's powerful, but it is a largely experimental device. You cannot use it to solve real-world problems, at least not yet. Maybe not even the next decade. That's the first problem. Problem number two is logistics. Quantum chips use something called qubits. They're incredibly fragile. They need very cold temperatures to function. Also, they have very high error rates. Willow 2 was not error-free. And the third is the question of security. Quantum computers are very, very powerful. They can break encryption codes. These are codes that keep your information private. But now they can be compromised. And companies are already scared about this. In February, Apple made an announcement. It was making its iMessage encryption quantum proof. This is to stop future computers from reading them. That time has not come yet, but quantum computing is no longer the stuff of science fiction. It is here, brimming with possibilities. The Willow chip has given us a glimpse, a look into what the future might hold. But as we stand at the edge of this revolution, it's important that we tread carefully. The real question is not what quantum computers can do. The real question is what we choose to do with them.
The class of 2016 is truly defined by its inventive, pioneering mentality that accompanies a strong commitment to Gilman tradition. Throughout its time here at Gilman, the class of 2016 has been coming up with new ideas and challenging the world around it. Gilman maintains its classic core values by cultivating mind, body, and spirit in its students, but also champions an environment of acceptance and diversity. The people in our lives, especially our parents and teachers, have such huge roles as well. The parents here today, first off, sending us to Gilman was far from a small financial investment. I'd like to personally thank each of you for sending your sons here, as I can't imagine the class of 2016 without any one of these men on stage. Further, thank you for all the time and love you've put into our lives. You've instilled values in us, fed and clothed us, and simply been there for us every step of the way. Just like we've done these past few years, we'll be exploring the unknown, whether that be attending colleges across the country, traveling the world during gap years, or fulfilling military service in foreign countries. As we embrace the new, however, we won't forget the old. Our friendships, values, and memories from Gilman will always stay with us.
Authorities on Monday arrested Luigi Mangione, the man suspected of killing United Health executive Brian Thompson, in a brazen shooting outside a Manhattan hotel last week, ending a massive 5-day manhunt. At a press conference, New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch said the 26-year-old was captured in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after he was spotted eating at a McDonald's.
The suspect was in a McDonald's and was recognized by an employee who then called local police. Responding officers questioned the suspect, who was acting suspiciously and was carrying multiple fraudulent IDs.
Tariff or tax, then we will charge them 100 or 200% tariff or tax in return. In other words, it's an eye for an eye.
An eye for an eye, that's what Donald Trump is promising China. Trump will take office next month, and he's already issuing threats. He has vowed to impose a 10% tax on Chinese imports. This is on top of the existing tariffs. The move is bound to raise trade tensions between the two rivals. Beijing is now bracing for impact. Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, is trying to mitigate the risk of higher tariffs. He's planning a spending spree. He held a meeting with China's Politburo. These are the country's top 24 leaders, the Politburo, and the outcome of the meeting was a statement. It said that China will go easy on interest rates. You know what this is about? China's monetary policy, interest rates on different kinds of loans. And with this statement, China is sending a signal. It wants to keep the cost of borrowing low. This is a major shift. For the first time in 14 years, China is signaling that it wants to ease interest rates. The idea is quite clear, boosting cash flow into the economy. When you lower interest rates, loans become cheaper, so more cash circulates in the system. Beijing wants to do that for the first time in 14 years. It is also planning another stimulus package, again to inject more cash. These moves are welcome, but they come too late because China's economy has already tanked. Domestic consumption is sluggish, government debt is high, the property sector has collapsed. And China will miss its growth target. It is official now. This year's target was 5%. As of today, China is growing at around 4%. The only way to push this number is through stimulus. It's something that Beijing has been reluctant to do. But they don't really have a choice anymore. Xi Jinping has finally decided to pull the trigger. Both investors and observers are cheering the news. Chinese stocks saw a rally today. But this optimism could be short-lived because Donald Trump is waiting in the wings, ready to start a trade war. If and when he does, can China spend its way out of this crisis? Their premier is already sounding an alarm. That's Li Qiang. He's worried about the growing curbs on trade.
If we look at the obstacles to economic globalization, some countries now easily resort to imposing additional high tariffs, erecting barriers of protection. There are more and more restrictive measures on trade.
Li Qiang did not name anyone. He did not have to. He's clearly referring to the West. China faces a tough trade environment there. Joe Biden has restricted the flow of Western technology to China. He has banned the export of advanced chips. Plus, Europe is targeting Chinese EVs. Tariffs on these cars are as high as 45%. Trump wants to tighten the screws further. He has threatened tariffs of up to 60%, 60. So the pressure on China is unlikely to ease, not anytime soon, which brings us back to the question, how far can this stimulus help? Can it offset the growing trade challenges? Reports say the impact of the stimulus will be limited. Beijing is yet to spell out its plans. Some observers expect a large stimulus package or direct aid to Chinese citizens. What Beijing needs, though, is a long-term solution. Exports are critical for their economy. They contribute close to 20% of China's GDP, and Xi Jinping must find a way to revive exports. He has two options: negotiate with the West, promise some concessions, and in return seek more favorable trade terms. That is option one. The second option is riskier. If China feels boxed in, it could respond militarily. Use the PLA, their army, to apply pressure on rivals. How? With more provocations and different flashpoints. In fact, this could already be happening. Tensions are high in the Taiwan Strait. Today, Taipei raised a warning. China has deployed its largest naval fleet in the region. Nearly 90 ships have been dispatched. Taiwan says it is on high alert. Beijing is putting pressure on the Philippines as well. 6 days back, China's Coast Guard targeted vessels from Manila. They fired water cannons on them. And this is an old playbook. We've seen this before. China uses its military to distract people from domestic problems. But this time, the stakes are far higher. As China faces more economic pressures, the risk of a military misadventure is growing. And if that happens, tariffs alone won't be enough to rein in a belligerent Beijing. Every day, more than 100 people are killed in gun violence in America. It's shocking, but not new. This is the land of gun terror. Last week, it saw a killing that made it to the headlines. A man called Brian Thompson was shot dead in New York. He was the CEO of United Healthcare. Today, the police have arrested a suspect, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. They found a weapon on him, something called a ghost gun. What's a ghost gun? It's a privately made firearm, like a DIY gun, something that you can assemble at home or create using a 3D printer. Is this the gun that killed the CEO? How long have such ghost guns been around? Are they legal to own? And what are countries doing about them? Our next report tells you.
It's a video that was viewed millions of times. TV replays and social media all played the same security camera footage. United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson is on the sidewalk outside the New York Hilton Midtown. An unidentified hooded suspect approaches him from behind. He has a gun in his hand. He fires several shots at Brian, he falls to the ground, and the gunman flees on foot. The police have since been investigating, and today they made their first arrest. 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. He's named a person of interest. Mangione was arrested from Pennsylvania. He carried an unlicensed firearm. It's what many call a ghost gun. Now, ghost gun is used to describe two types of firearms. One that can be bought incomplete. Basically, you buy the primary components, assemble it at home, and turn it into a functional gun. The second is a gun that you make all by yourself, like a gun that you 3D print at home. Either way, they evade any sort of scrutiny. All the parts can usually be obtained without background checks. They also don't have serial numbers. Ghost guns have been available since the 1990s. There were DIY gun kits. You could purchase them and make guns at home. But their popularity has exploded in recent years, especially in the United States. In 2022, over 25,000 such firearms were recovered by the authorities. That's a 1,300% increase from 2016. Only 15 US states have laws on ghost guns. In 2022, US President Joe Biden pushed for a change in rules. Ghost guns would be under the same regulations as commercial firearms, meaning they would have a serial number. It was challenged in court, but for now, the regulations remain in place. But even if there's no DIY kit, it's possible to create fully printed plastic firearms. These are virtually untraceable and impossible for the government to regulate. Mangioni's gun was believed to be 3D printed, and it's not the only one. In 2022, former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was shot with a homemade gun. The suspect learned how to make it online. He ordered parts and gunpowder online as well. The gun was made with metal and wood. In the Halle synagogue shooting in Germany, the gunman used a weapon that was partially 3D printed. In Italy, the mafia have started using 3D printed firearms. So what are countries doing about these firearms? Australia criminalizes the possession of the digital plans and files to 3D print firearms. In Canada, it's a crime to manufacture any firearm. Singapore has made it an offence to possess a digital print of a gun. But beyond this, there's not much that they can do. With ghost guns now a global threat, the world is left to ask, can legislation catch up with technology? As the case of Luigi Mangione unfolds, one thing is clear. The impact of these untraceable weapons is far from over. While countries struggle to keep up with the growing danger, the rise of DIY firearms shows a new face of crime, one that can change the landscape of law enforcement forever.
It's time for the world to strap in because the Donald Trump era is here again. Forget niceties and protocols. We are seeing the Trump playbook of diplomacy, which is trolling the weak. Let me show you his recent message on social media. I'm quoting, "It was a pleasure to have dinner the other night with Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. I look forward to seeing the governor again soon so that we may continue our in-depth talks on tariffs and trade." It's not a parody account, we checked. This is the next US president. He's calling Canada a state of the United States. And he's calling Justin Trudeau a governor. It's not the best way to engage with your neighbor. But when that neighbor is Justin Trudeau, I guess it doesn't really matter. And the joke is not new. It started last month when Trudeau flew down to Florida. He met Donald Trump over dinner to discuss tariffs. Now, to give you some background, Trump is threatening a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. He says drugs and migrants are pouring in through the Canada border. And his solution? To threaten Canada with tariffs. Justin Trudeau says these tariffs will kill his economy, and he's not wrong. Around 75% of Canada's exports go to the US, so a tariff is bad news for Trudeau. Just one problem though, Donald Trump doesn't care. He cracked the same joke to Trudeau last month. He told him, if you can't pay the tariff, just join the United States, become the 51st state of America. Of course, that was behind the scenes, away from cameras or social media. But this time, Donald Trump has mocked Justin Trudeau in front of the whole world. It tells you a couple of things. One, Trump is quite tuned into the internet. He clearly saw the chatter around his comments, which is why he joined in. And two, he's showing Canada who's boss. Trump wants the world to know that he's negotiating from a position of strength, that he doesn't care what Trudeau thinks. It's certainly unconventional, but will it be successful? Canada has not reacted to Trump's remarks, but Trudeau did speak about the tariffs yesterday. He hinted at retaliatory actions.
And I think people south of the border are beginning to wake up to the reality that tariffs on everything from Canada would make life a lot more expensive for Americans. We will, of course, as we did 8 years ago, respond to unfair tariffs in a number of ways. And we're still looking at the right ways to respond.
It's a shameful episode for Trudeau and Canada. He's been trolled, his country has been insulted, and his office mocked. Any self-respecting leader would have reacted by now. Just look at Mexico. Trump has given them the same warning: fix the border or face 25% tariffs. And listen to how Mexico's president reacted.
We will defend our sovereignty and respect Mexicans, respect Mexico and the collaboration a government must have with another government and a trade partner with another trade partner, especially such important trade partners.
Respect Mexicans and respect Mexico. Look at the difference in messaging. We don't expect Mexico to take the fight to Trump. Chances are they will come around, but your attitude matters. Trudeau had no issues picking a fight with India. He accused the government of India of killing a Khalistani terrorist. He also expelled Indian diplomats from Canada, all of this with zero evidence. But now that same Justin Trudeau is pandering to Donald Trump. If you are a Canadian, you should be enraged today. You should question Trudeau's hypocrisy. And if you're a world leader, you should take note of Trump's strategy. He has not changed since 2021. If anything, he's more brazen. So be prepared for threats and intimidation, maybe even trolling and insults. And most importantly, perhaps download Truth Social. It's Donald Trump's own social media app. It's where he posts all his wild ideas and promises. If you don't have it, you may miss a trade war or two. Our next story is from Africa, from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Their mineral wealth is being looted, their environment is being decimated, and the locals are paying the price. It's a story that's all too familiar, the classic neo-colonial playbook. But the difference this time is the exploiter. This time, China is the neo-colonizer. A Chinese mining company is tearing through a wildlife reserve in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's an endangered UNESCO World Heritage Site. But the Chinese firm is destroying the sanctuary. Here's our report.
This is the Okapi Wildlife Reserve, located in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, an endangered one. It was set up in 1996 to protect okapis. These animals are also known as forest giraffes or zebra giraffes. There are barely 30,000 left in the world, and the DRC Reserve is home to about 15% of them. But the Okapi Sanctuary is under threat, thanks to a Chinese mining company called Kimia Mining Investment. These are the aerial shots of the Muchacha Ming complex. It's a gold mining complex located inside the Okapi Wildlife Reserve. You can see the havoc it has already caused. Vast tracts have been deforested. Silt and effluents are flowing into the nearby river. This has had a devastating impact on local wildlife.
We are no longer seeing some species that used to be well protected here. In our time, we've seen protected species such as okapi, elephants, antelopes. We even saw monkeys, but it is no longer easy to see them.
It's not just land animals, it's the fish too. They are slowly being poisoned. The Chinese firm is reportedly using mercury in its extraction process to separate gold from its ore. The mercury then seeps into the soil and nearby river, turning the entire area toxic. The Chinese firm argues that this is necessary. It says that the mine provides crucial revenue for the DRC government, and that the environment is not more important than economic growth. But growth for whom? Because the locals don't seem to have benefited.
I'm one of the former inhabitants of Badengado. Around 14 years ago, we lived well, mixing work in the fields with artisanal gold mining. Our life has not been the same since the Chinese came and chased us out of the bush. We can no longer work or send our children to school. If the Chinese meet you in the forest, they hit you. That's how difficult life has become here in Badengado.
So a foreign company comes in, decimates the environment, drives the locals out of their traditional jobs, impoverishes them, and then justifies all of this by citing economic growth. It's a tale as old as time in Africa, and throughout much of the global south. This is neocolonialism at its most brutal. The locals used to mine gold in the region before the Chinese firm came in. They had small artisanal mines, but when the Chinese firm arrived, they say there was a crackdown. Now, only the Chinese are allowed to exploit the land.
The community is worried because the Chinese are operating in a protected area where the community is not allowed to do the same.
If the locals want to find some gold, they need permission from the Chinese firm. They need to pay a fee just to try and find leftovers, and they say the fee is unaffordable for most. So how did a Chinese firm take over a protected wildlife reserve and drive the locals to despair? Well, the boundaries of the reserve were redrawn, not officially, but by the government officials who provided mining permits. The distortion has been identified now, but it might be too late. The Chinese firm holds permits till the year 2048, so it'll be tough to dislodge them from the protected area. Unless the people of the DRC put pressure, their land and wildlife will continue to get ravaged for years to come.
If someone works at a restaurant, is it their workplace? Yes, of course it is. But what if they're part of a political party, and what if they visit the party headquarters? Is that their workplace? What if they're sexually harassed at an election campaign? Can they seek redressal? These questions are complex, and this week India's apex court had to answer them. It was hearing a petition which wants POSH to be applied to political parties. POSH is the law against sexual harassment of women at workplace. But the Supreme Court of India rejected this plea. They disposed of it. They directed the petitioner to move the Election Commission of India, which is India's poll body. But why was the plea rejected? And why does it matter? To understand this, let's look at the law. It's called the Prevention of Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act of 2013. In short, the POSH Act. It addresses sexual harassment at any workplace, whether private or public. It states that employers have certain duties, like setting up an ICC or the Internal Complaints Committee. This committee is meant to address complaints about sexual harassment. If there are 10 or more employees in a company, it has to set up an ICC. But do political parties in India have such a committee? India has 6 national political parties. Only one of them has an ICC, and that is the CPM, the Communist Party of India Marxist. The ruling BJP does not have one, neither does the Congress Party, and no one knows or no one is sure about the Aam Aadmi Party. Remember, these are India's policy makers. These parties have many female workers who are left vulnerable to harassment. It's a sad state of affairs. This is what inspired the plea in court to bring POSH to politics. Then why was it rejected? Because of a loophole in the law. Let me quote from what the Supreme Court said. Political parties are under no obligation to comply with the POSH Act as employer-employee relationship does not exist in them. In India, political parties have special privileges. They are not considered legal entities. They are associations of individuals. So technically, political parties are not employers and their members are not employees. So the guardrails are quite ambiguous, and the court's judgment has only reinforced this ambiguity and left the problem unaddressed, because there is surely a problem. According to a United Nations survey, 50% women in Indian politics have faced verbal abuse, 45% have faced physical abuse, especially during election campaigns, and 58% said that the perpetrators were party colleagues. Stating the obvious, but women should be safe in all spaces, including in politics. And policies should back this basic right, especially in politics. Sure, political parties may not be employers per se, but the legal definition of employer is quite broad. It includes any person or board responsible for management and supervision. Isn't that what party offices also do? They have more than 10 workers, who abide by duties of local units, who travel for work, who hold meetings. Isn't that what employees also generally do? So why are political parties off the hook? A woman can face harassment while working from home, while traveling for campaigns, or visiting party offices. In all these instances, shouldn't she be able to seek redressal? And if not with the ICC, then elsewhere, through other guidelines that protect political workers against harassment. And there are examples the world over. The European Union has done it. They have passed a special resolution on violence against women in politics. Bolivia has criminalized it. Kenya has gone a step further. They have set up what they call political parties dispute tribunals. And the British have an Equality Act that includes political parties. So instead of bringing political parties under the definition of a workplace, failing at it, and letting business continue as usual, why don't we create a distinct, defined space with a code of conduct that is mandatory and ensure the safety of women in politics? Why can't we do it? You see, it is easy to stand with the Me Too movement, to condemn rape cases, or to march in a couple of women's protests. It is easy to make rules for others. What is difficult is to lead by example, to change how we treat women, to change our policies, starting with your own political party. As they say, charity begins at home.
The class of 2016 is truly defined by its inventive, pioneering mentality that accompanies a strong commitment to Gilman tradition. Throughout its time here at Gilman, the class of 2016 has been coming up with new ideas and challenging the world around it. Gilman maintains its classic core values by cultivating mind, body, and spirit in its students, but also champions an environment of acceptance and diversity. The people in our lives, especially our parents and teachers, have such huge roles as well. The parents here today, first off, sending us to Gilman was far from a small financial investment. I'd like to personally thank each of you for sending your sons here, as I can't imagine the class of 2016 without any one of these men on stage. Further, thank you for all the time and love you have put into our lives. You've instilled values in us, fed and clothed us, and simply been there for us every step of the way. Just like we've done these past few years, we'll be exploring the unknown, whether that be attending colleges across the country, traveling the world during gap years, or fulfilling military service in foreign countries. As we embrace the new, however, we won't forget the old. Our friendships, values, and memories from Gilman will always stay with us.
Authorities on Monday arrested Luigi Mangione, the man suspected of killing United Health executive Brian Thompson, in a brazen shooting outside a Manhattan hotel last week, ending a massive 5-day manhunt. At a press conference, New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch said the 26-year-old was captured in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after he was spotted eating at a McDonald's.
The suspect was in a McDonald's and was recognized by an employee who then called local police. Responding officers questioned the suspect, who was acting suspiciously and was carrying multiple fraudulent IDs as well as a U.S. passport. Upon further investigation, officers recovered a firearm on his person as well as a suppressor, both consistent with the weapon used in the murder. They also recovered clothing, including
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Syria, a protester waves the rebel HTS flag on the top of a monument in Damascus. Christmas spirit lights up Ukraine's Kiev amid a war and rampant power blackouts. And protesters in Seoul play out K-pop hits to fire up impeachment protests. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1996, South Africa adopted a new constitution. It was signed by Nelson Mandela, who was the country's first black president. The constitution replaced apartheid-era laws and marked the country's transition from apartheid rule to a democracy. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
It doesn't look as well as I would expect. Across the political spectrum, we should send a clear signal that is.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Our top story, a young techie from Uttar Pradesh died by suicide at his residence in Bengaluru on Monday. His death has sparked a major debate over divorce and alimony laws, namely the treatment of men by the legal system. Now, Atul Subhash, who was an engineer at a private firm, left behind a 24-page suicide note in which he accused his wife and her relatives of harassment. Initial investigations suggest that Subhash had been facing marital issues and his wife had filed several cases against him in Uttar Pradesh, which he discussed at length in the video which has gone viral. Subhash detailed his struggles with false cases, including accusations of murder, dowry, harassment and domestic violence, some later withdrawn, including a settlement demand of 3 crore. He also alleged corruption in courts and shared his despair over losing custody of his 4-year-old son. His brother, in an emotional appeal, has urged the president and the central government to ensure justice, describing his ordeal as a legal genocide of men. Subhash's death has reignited conversations on men's rights and the justice system and how it treats married men.
मुझे सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया और प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया से सिर्फ ये गुजारिश करनी है कि मेरे भाई को जस्टिस मिलना चाहिए एट एनी कॉस्ट। अगर वो सही है तो, अगर वो गलत है तो प्रूफ आप मुझे कीजिए कि वो कहाँ गलत है। इवन मैं ये चाहूँगा कि जिस जज के खिलाफ उसने ये आवाज़ उठाई है, देयर शुड बी अ प्रॉपर इन्वेस्टिगेशन अगेंस्ट हर। वो नाम भी मेंशन किया है अपने सुसाइडल नोट पे। मेरे भाई की तरह बहुत सारे भाई हैं, मेरे बड़े लोग भी होंगे जो शादी करके बहुत गलत तरीके से फंसे हुए होंगे। तो मुझे ये कहना है कि सभी लोगों को न्याय मिलना चाहिए, एक कानून होना चाहिए उनके अगेंस्ट, हमारे फेवर में भी एक कानून होना चाहिए जिसकी हम हेल्प ले सकें।
हमारा बेटा हमको कहता था कि पापा हम जाते हैं कोर्ट में तो हमारे पास हमको जो है सो पूरा जस्टिस नहीं मिलता है। हर आदमी हमको जो है सो कानून व्यवस्था के अंतर्गत कोई काम नहीं होता है, लेकिन ये कभी भी जो है तो वहाँ की कानून व्यवस्था को एकदम मानता था कि एकदम खत्म है। उनको तो 40 बार बेंगलोर, कम से कम 40 बार गया होगा बेंगलोर से बड़ा जौनपुर, और माने इतनी धारा उस पर एक खत्म हो जाता